Greetings, and I want to take this opportunity to welcome you to Global Leadership Perspective. And today, I would want us to have a conversation concerning the lately sprout of protests in some part of Africa. And before I go further, I would like to take this opportunity to please ask you to subscribe to this channel if you've not subscribed, and this will give us an opportunity to have this kind of message reach many other people. And so, why do we have protests sprouting in quite a number of countries in Africa? Today, the 20th of March 2023, they were protests in a few countries. One of them, South Africa, led by the opposition leader, and two, Kenya, led by the opposition leader, Senegal, led by the opposition leader, and Nigeria uh, was also supposed to have this kind of protest, but it was not as massive as the other countries I've mentioned. And though I've seen we had a few spots of them in different places, and also Tunisia. Also part and parcel of this jagwagon. And so, what is really at stake, and why is this happening at such a time as this in Africa? You know. Mm. But before I do that, maybe as a way of trying to do a quick skim through some of those protests and how they were handled, I saw that in Kenya, the police was confrontational. They really roughed up the protesters, the people that were coming out to the street to air their voices and their grievances. And so the scenes were not quite good, and there are people who are saying that this was not professional. The police has, for that matter, exposed their unprofessionalism and the need for further reforms where they are concerned. Of course, if you voted for the government, most likely you will not agree with that. But if you did not vote for them and you're part of the opposition, then most likely you will endorse that kind of feeling. And where South Africa is concerned, I think the police performed better comparing to Kenya. They were a bit decent, and they were there to ensure that they are protecting to some larger extent the people who were protesting. Senegal also fairly good, and of course Tunisia to some extent has been always fairly good. Now, back to our question, why do we have these protests sprouting in Africa, especially some of those countries I've mentioned? And this has the potential of becoming contagious and spreading to other African countries. Remember, this year alone, we have quite a number of countries that will be conducting election, and we don't know the outcome of it. So, I want to give about 3 to 4 reasons why this is happening. And the first reason, in my own view, has to do with the second scramble for Africa. There was the first scramble when people were coming and they colonized Africa, and now, of course, the more African attained their independence in terms of rule, governance, and this has supposed to be the case, but I think over time, a lot of things, a lot of political, a lot of interest, economical interest have happened, and it appears that it has generated a second scramble for Africa, especially some of the popular nations such as the European nations, and also partial the US. they had lost touch with most of the African countries, and they had given opportunity for countries from the east to come in, especially the China and also partially Russia. And so this is as these nations have realized that it's not going to augur well with them, so they decided to come in back with force and to try and take the control of these nations. And because of this, there is a feeling from a section of thinkers that these nations who are scrambling and want to take back the control, they are also installing specific leaders they feel that are going to advance their interest. And also there's an aspect of resources. One of the examples is, for example, in Congo alone has quite a number of resources, and that's why of course the place is not peaceful, and unfortunately there are quite many other nations that are benefiting out of it. And of course the aspect of business is also another issue. For example, one of the current issue in Kenya is the issue of GMO. America want to ensure that GMO is indeed introduced in Kenya, and so because of business, really they are coming in a big way, and they want to take back that control. And so that is the first reason, in my own view. The second reason, in my own view, is poor leadership. Poor leadership, especially from most of the presidents and the people in state and in government institutions. They tend to some extent, most of them lack the vision for Africa and for their countries. They do not have clear objectives, and even if they have, they are not committed to it. There is no goodwill, and so their leadership is more of authoritative and manipulative. They lack progressive agenda where their countries are concerned, and so this largely and by time has made the population to get discontent, and subsequently coming out and beginning to protest. And so poor leadership is a factor. And number three, looking at systematic and systemic aspect of it, where that the way the system has been designed and the way things are going, and which is attached to leadership, you realize that there are things that are engraved in the system that are not really pro the advancement and the growth of Africa. And some of the things also, they are systemic in a way that they are engraved in the system, and they are part and parcel of it, whether they are toxic or they are not, whether they are harmful or they are not, whether they are beneficial or they are not, whether they add value premium to Africa or not. They are part of the system, and they are also systemic in nature. So really this has to be dealt with properly, and that's why things such as bourgeoisies who come in, the one who want to take control of the city, of the countries. That's why we have issues of kleptocrats and also proletarians who are on the receiving end, who are being used to amass wealth by the few individuals. And so this is really an issue, and we must not ignore. The fourth-ish thing I'm looking at has to do with poor governance model and systems within the African countries. I'm not saying that, really, I'm not attacking the African countries, but again, this remains to be facts on the ground, that governance models and systems, they're really wanting, and those who have good ones, they are only there on paper and they're not being implemented. And that's why most of them will always go out for benchmarking reasons, to say, saying that they're going to see how other nations are running their programs, and so that they can come and implement, and when they come, they do not implement anything. And so for example, what caused the Arabic Spring a few years back was the public felt the absence of political, civil, and economic freedom. And this has to do with governance, and this has to do with the way the nations and states are conducting themselves, where they feel that their judiciary systems are been captured and they are not executing justice. Rather, they sell justice, and administration is there to do what they want, and other arms of the government, they are not left out. They are being manipulative, and they are being used to serve the interest of the few. So I believe these kind of problems, they have really undermined that kind of good governance, and so to this, for I mean, the solution to such a problem is that there have to be goodwill, and also, apart from goodwill, we need proper reforms. Such countries in Africa need proper reforms, whether, for example, the police, the way we've seen how they've behaved, for example, in the Kenyan proper protest. There are kind of reforms that are needed, and you'll realize in some other countries the judiciary, really, there are quite a number of reforms that are needed there, and so that and they have to be very genuine and very serious reforms, and this calls for good leadership, and this calls for goodwill. And so for example, so I've talked about the second scramble for Africa: poor leadership, systematic and systemic issues, and then poor governance model and systems within the African nations. When I was talking about South Africa, remember that South Africa, over time, the problem has been structural challenges stemming from apartheid, and these are the things that need to be addressed, and they need to be addressed from the root cause, and proper adjustment will be made. For example, in terms of leadership, we've had failure of leadership to expand general and essential services to the general public, where most of these countries are concerned. So, because the bourgeoisie, the kleptocrats, wants to enjoy these things and take advantage of the proletarians, and use them for their means, and so that they can become more richer and or they can have more premiums in life. Really, this is needed. When the general population feel that they are not getting the general services, because of poor leadership, they get agitated, and the sense of feeling deprived by poor leadership really comes in, and build this kind of anger in the people, and they really see the need of going out to sort of express their frustrations and their anger on the street. And so, really, we need intentional leadership, and we need goodwill that is going to sort out these challenges. And eventually, I hope and believe that things are going to work for African countries. But just a way of also concluding, the aspect of external forces is one that really dealing with it is very tricky. But these African countries, they have to be firm, and they have really to deal with this issue. And the other thing, especially when we talk that also comes in between most of these things I've talked about, it has to do the issue of corruption. Yeah, the corruption is rampant. Corruption has been engraved, is in the system, and is also sort of systemic. It is part and parcel of the system, so that now even some of the general population, they feel, when you talk about corruption, it's a normal thing. It's not, they feel, they no longer feel it is something that is exclusively unique. It is something that is normal, it's a lifestyle, and I think for us to have reached there, indeed, it is an indication that all is not well, and a lot need to be done in order to deconstruct such kind of feelings, and to really begin to construct the mental stratification and mental system, so that we can begin to look at things proper and a good perspective, and we can begin to really do things in the right way. So I pray and hope that this can change, and eventually we can have a good continent. God bless Africa.